Combat medic Samuel Doc. Reeves had seen enough battlefield injuries to know that some wounds went deeper than flesh and bone, but he'd never encountered anything like what was happening to the Veltani woman lying on the makeshift surgical table in the neutral zone medical tent. Her bioluminescent patterns, the flowing designs beneath her skin that normally pulsed with the rhythm of Veltani life, were fading to darkness in a way that made his combat-tested medical instincts scream warnings about systemic failure. "Doc, we've got 3 more incoming from the perimeter skirmish," called Nurse Martinez, her voice carrying the controlled urgency that marked medical personnel who'd learned to function under impossible circumstances. 2 human casualties and 1 Veltani, with what appears to be energy weapon burns. "Stabilize them in triage," Doc replied, not looking up from his patient whose condition was deteriorating in ways that his 8 years of battlefield medicine hadn't prepared him to understand. "This one's got something I've never seen before." The woman, who'd introduced herself weakly as healer Lyrana Velmos before losing consciousness, showed signs of what appeared to be complete physiological shutdown despite having no visible injuries, beyond minor shrapnel wounds from the terrorist attack that had rocked their field hospital 6 hours earlier. Her breathing was shallow, her pulse erratic, and the bioluminescent patterns that served as both artistic expression and medical indicators for her species were dimming toward complete extinction. "Her energy readings are off the charts," reported Specialist Chen, monitoring equipment that combined human medical technology with salvaged Veltani diagnostic tools. "But it's not elevated energy. It's like her entire bioelectrical system is being drained." Doc examined the diagnostic displays, his medical training automatically analyzing readings that painted a picture of systematic energy depletion that human medicine had no framework for understanding. "It's like she's hemorrhaging life force instead of blood." The neutral zone medical facility existed in the uncomfortable space between human and Veltani military lines, serving casualties from both sides during the fragile ceasefire that everyone hoped would prevent the kind of interstellar war that would make the current border conflicts look like minor disagreements. Doc had been treating Veltani wounded alongside human casualties for months, learning enough about their physiology to provide basic care. But this was beyond anything in the cross-species medical protocols. "Healer Velmos," Doc said, gently checking her responses while noting that her skin felt unusually cold despite normal body temperature readings. "Can you tell me what happened? Your injuries don't match your symptoms." Lyrana's eyes opened with obvious effort, the violet irises that marked her as Veltani now dim with exhaustion that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than physical trauma. "I overextended," she whispered, her voice carrying an accent that made standard Galactic sound musical despite her obvious pain. "Too many healings, too much essence given." Essence given. Veltani healing requires personal energy sacrifice, life force shared with patience. Her breathing grew more labored as she struggled to explain concepts that human medicine had never encountered. "I have been treating human casualties when your medicine could not help." Doc felt pieces clicking together in his mind, with the unpleasant clarity of a diagnosis he really didn't want to confirm. "You've been using your own life energy to heal human soldiers. The wounded were dying. Your medicine works for your people, but some injuries require bioenergy healing that only Veltani can provide." Lyrana's patterns flickered weakly as she tried to maintain consciousness. "I could not let them die when I had the power to save them. But using that power is killing you. The cost of healing is always paid by someone. I chose to pay it myself rather than let others suffer." Doc looked at the diagnostic displays showing energy depletion that was approaching critical levels, then at the Veltani woman who'd been secretly risking her life to save human casualties, while their own medical supplies focused on treating their own species. "How many?" he asked quietly. 17 human soldiers over the past 3 months. Energy burns that your medicine could not treat, internal injuries that required bioresonance healing, neurological damage that needed direct life force transfer. Lyrana's voice grew weaker with each word. Each healing cost more than I could safely give, but I could not watch them die when I had the power to help. And now you're dying from the accumulated cost. The life essence debt must be paid, either through rest and recovery that I do not have time for, or through. She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. Doc studied the readings showing continued deterioration despite every intervention human medicine could provide. Lyrana was dying from energy depletion that his training had never covered, and she was dying because she'd chosen to save human lives at the cost of her own. Is there anything that can restore the energy you've lost? Any way to replenish what you've given? Veltani healing technology could help, but our medical supplies are reserved for our own wounded. Lyrana's smile held no bitterness despite the obvious irony. The same species barrier that made me necessary for treating human casualties prevents me from accessing the treatment I need. What about compatibility between species? Could human energy somehow supplement what you've lost? Lyrana's eyes widened slightly, her fading pattern showing the first flicker of hope he'd seen since beginning treatment. It is theoretically possible, but the energy transfer would require direct bioresonance contact. Blood to blood, life force to life force. Like a transfusion. Like sharing the essence of life itself. But such contact between species has never been attempted. The risks are unknown and the consequences could be permanent. Doc looked around the medical tent, noting that the other staff were focused on treating the casualties from the latest attack, unaware that one of their patients was dying from the selfless act of healing their own people. Permanent how? Bioresonance contact creates bonds between those who share life essence. Consciousness connection, emotional linkage, shared awareness that transcends individual identity. Lyrana's voice grew even weaker as she struggled to explain. You would become part of my healing abilities, and I would become part of your medical knowledge, forever linked through the energy we share. Doc felt his medical training warring with human caution and simple gratitude for someone who'd risked everything to save his fellow soldiers. The smart choice was to continue conventional treatment and hope that Veltani medical personnel would eventually arrive with appropriate technology. The right choice was to accept responsibility for saving someone who'd already sacrificed everything to save others. Tell me what I need to do, he said, reaching for his medical kit while mentally preparing for the most unconventional treatment of his career. Doc, Lyrana whispered, her hand finding his with strength she shouldn't have possessed, you do not understand the full implications. Bioresonance bonding is not just medical treatment. It is permanent connection that will change both our lives in ways neither of us can predict. Maybe, but you saved 17 of my people by risking your life. The least I can do is risk mine to save yours. As Doc prepared to perform a medical procedure that would either save Lyrana's life or create complications that neither human nor Veltani medicine had ever addressed, he realized that his simple goal of treating battlefield casualties was about to become something considerably more complex and infinitely more important than routine military medicine. The bioresonance transfer required equipment that Doc improvised from human medical technology and salvaged Veltani healing tools, creating what amounted to the most dangerous medical procedure of his career, while working with systems he barely understood. Lyrana guided him through the process with whispered instructions that covered techniques no human had ever attempted. The connection requires direct contact between circulatory systems, she explained, as Doc prepared the hybrid transfusion apparatus. But unlike human blood transfusion, this involves transferring life essence that carries consciousness, memory, and bioenergy patterns. So I'm not just giving you blood, I'm giving you what exactly? Part of your life force, part of your awareness, part of your ability to heal and be healed. Lyrana's patterns flickered weakly as she struggled to maintain consciousness long enough to complete the explanation. And I will share the same with you, creating permanent linkage that transcends individual identity. Doc activated the transfer apparatus, noting that the combined human-Veltani medical technology looked like something that would either revolutionize interspecies medicine or kill them both in fascinating new ways. Have you ever seen this done before? Never between species. The theoretical frameworks exist, but the practical applications have never been tested. Her smile held exhaustion mixed with something that might have been anticipation. We are about to conduct the most dangerous medical experiment in recorded history. Well, Doc said, connecting the transfer lines to his circulatory system. I've always been terrible at following safe medical protocols anyway. The moment the bioresonance transfer began, Doc felt his consciousness expand to include awareness that definitely wasn't his own. Through the connection, he could sense Lyrana's life force stabilizing as his energy supplemented her depleted reserves, but he could also feel her memories, her emotions, and her understanding of healing techniques that human medicine had never imagined. The sensation was overwhelming, like suddenly having access to an entirely different nervous system while maintaining his own identity. He could feel Lyrana's relief as her energy levels stabilized, her gratitude for his willingness to risk unknown consequences, and her growing amazement as the bioresonance created connections between their consciousness that neither species had thought possible. The bond is forming, Lyrana said, her voice now carrying harmonics that Doc could somehow understand despite never hearing them before. Can you feel the healing pathways activating? Doc could feel something activating, though healing pathways seemed inadequate to describe the sudden awareness of bioenergy flows, cellular regeneration patterns, and diagnostic capabilities that operated through consciousness rather than equipment. I can sense injuries that aren't visible, energy imbalances, cellular damage, neurological trauma that conventional scans don't detect. The life bond grants access to Veltani healing abilities, while providing me with human medical knowledge and physiological understanding. Lyrana sat up slowly, her bioluminescent patterns now glowing with renewed vitality that included colors Doc had never seen before. We have become a unified medical system that transcends the limitations of either species' approach to healing. The unified medical system, Doc repeated, testing his newfound awareness by examining his own vital signs through senses he'd never possessed. This is either the most successful medical procedure in history, or the most elaborate way anyone's ever accidentally merged consciousness with someone from another species. The bioresonance readings are extraordinary, reported Specialist Chen, staring at diagnostic displays that showed unprecedented synchronization between human and Veltani physiological patterns. Your life signs are perfectly coordinated, and the energy readings suggest you're operating as a single biological system. Doc looked at Lyrana, noting that he could sense her emotional responses to their shared condition: relief, wonder, and something deeper that suggested the life bond had created connections that went far beyond medical necessity. What exactly have we created here? A partnership that allows human medical precision to combine with Veltani bioenergy healing, Lyrana replied, her consciousness touching his through the bond in ways that made verbal communication seem almost redundant, but also a permanent connection that makes us responsible for each other's welfare and grants us joint authority over both species' medical systems. Joint authority. The life bond is recognized under both human and Veltani medical law as creating provisional partnerships with shared decision-making authority over treatment protocols, resource allocation, and medical ethics. Lyrana activated displays that showed the legal implications of their spontaneous bonding. We have become the first officially recognized interspecies medical team in recorded history. Doc studied the authorization levels that were suddenly available to him, noting that the life bond had granted access to Veltani medical technology, treatment protocols, and diagnostic systems that human medicine had never been permitted to use. This seems like a lot of authority to grant based on emergency medical treatment. The life bond exists precisely because the most advanced healing capabilities require personal investment that transcends political boundaries or species limitations. Lyrana's expression grew serious as she accessed reports from across the medical facility. But the authority comes with responsibilities that include protecting medical neutrality, ensuring treatment serves healing rather than military objectives, and preventing the weaponization of healing technology. Weaponization. Lyrana activated intelligence displays that made Doc's stomach sink. Corporate interests have been attempting to capture Veltani healers to extract the secrets of bioenergy manipulation for military applications. The life bond grants us joint authority to prevent such exploitation, but it also makes us targets for elimination by groups that prefer medical technology to serve conquest rather than care. Doc examined the intelligence reports, his new awareness allowing him to detect patterns of systematic medical sabotage that his previous training wouldn't have recognized. The equipment failures we've been experiencing, they weren't accidental, were they? Corporate security forces have been deliberately targeting medical facilities that demonstrate successful interspecies cooperation. The attack on our hospital was specifically designed to eliminate personnel who might prove that human and Veltani medicine can work together. Lyrana's patterns shifted to colors that Doc's enhanced understanding recognized as controlled anger. They prefer that both species remain dependent on corporate-supplied medical technology, rather than developing independent cooperative capabilities. And now we have proof that interspecies medical cooperation is not only possible but extraordinarily effective, combined with the legal authority to expose and prevent further sabotage. Lyrana stood, testing her renewed strength while accessing diagnostic systems through their shared consciousness. But we also have enemies who will stop at nothing to prevent that proof from reaching official channels. Doc felt the weight of responsibility settling around him like a particularly complex piece of medical equipment that he'd have to learn to operate under hostile conditions. So our emergency medical procedure has accidentally created the most advanced healing partnership in known space, while simultaneously making us targets for elimination by corporate interests who profit from medical scarcity. An accurate assessment of our situation, Lyrana confirmed with a smile that suggested she found their circumstances more exciting than terrifying. Though I should mention that the life bond also grants us access to protective capabilities that make elimination attempts considerably more challenging than our enemies might expect. As alarms began sounding throughout the medical facility, indicating incoming hostile forces that weren't part of either official military, Doc realized that his simple goal of saving one patient's life had just evolved into protecting the future of interspecies medical cooperation from groups that viewed healing as a commodity to be controlled rather than a capability to be shared. Well, he said, accessing Veltani defensive systems through the life bond while maintaining human medical protocols. This definitely wasn't covered in combat medic training. Though I have to admit, having access to alien healing abilities might come in handy during whatever's about to happen. The life bond grants more than healing abilities, Lyrana replied, her consciousness merging with his as they prepared to defend their medical facility against attackers who viewed their cooperation as a threat to profitable warfare. It grants the power to protect what matters most together. The corporate assault on the medical facility came with the subtlety of a meteor strike and approximately the same regard for medical neutrality. Armed security forces surrounded the hospital while overhead, combat drones maintained positions that suggested they were prepared to eliminate the entire facility, rather than allow evidence of successful interspecies medical cooperation to survive. "This is Commander Blake, Meridian Corporate Security," came the transmission from the lead assault vehicle. "We are conducting lawful recovery of stolen medical assets and personnel of interest. Surrender the alien subjects and the compromised human medical personnel immediately." "Compromised human medical personnel?" Doc asked, accessing defensive systems through the life bond while coordinating evacuation procedures for patients who couldn't be moved. "I guess successful medical treatment of alien patients qualifies as treason in corporate accounting. The life bond grants us access to protective capabilities that most medical facilities don't possess," Lyrana replied, activating Veltani defensive systems that transformed the hospital from vulnerable medical center into something considerably more defensible. "Though we'll need to protect our patients, while demonstrating that medical cooperation serves healing rather than military objectives." The first shots came from corporate forces testing the hospital's defenses, but instead of hitting vulnerable medical equipment, their weapons struck energy barriers that absorbed the attacks while converting the energy into power for enhanced medical systems. The life bond had activated. The battle that followed demonstrated why the life bond had never been attempted between species before. The coordination required to simultaneously defend against military assault while providing medical treatment to casualties from both sides required a level of consciousness integration that individual awareness couldn't achieve. Doc found himself treating injured corporate soldiers who'd been wounded by their own commanders' escalating tactics, using Veltani healing techniques to save the lives of people who'd been sent to capture him. Meanwhile, Lyrana coordinated evacuation procedures for patients while using her enhanced understanding of human physiology to provide treatment that neither species could have managed alone. "Corporate Command, this is Field Unit 7, came panicked transmissions from the assault force. "The medical facility is somehow converting our weapons fire into defensive energy, and they're treating our wounded personnel despite active combat operations. Request clarification on engagement protocols. Maintain assault parameters." Blake's voice carried the kind of cold calculation that suggested corporate profits mattered more than soldier survival. "Medical personnel treating enemy wounded constitute legitimate military targets under corporate security protocols." Doc paused in his treatment of a corporate soldier whose injuries were severe enough to require bioenergy healing, accessing the life bond's enhanced awareness to confirm what he'd just heard. Did they just classify medical treatment as an act of war? "Corporate security doctrine defines any action that reduces their tactical advantage as hostile behavior," Lyrana replied grimly, her consciousness touching his through the bond with information that painted a disturbing picture of corporate military philosophy. "Healing enemy wounded prevents them from being eliminated, which interferes with corporate objectives. So they're willing to let their own people die, rather than allow medical neutrality to interfere with profitable warfare." The life bond protocols were created precisely to protect medical personnel from such calculations, Lyrana said, activating emergency broadcasts that would document corporate violations of medical neutrality for interstellar war crimes tribunals. "But the protocols require formal recognition of the bond's authority." Doc looked around the medical facility, noting that their combined human Veltani treatment capabilities were saving lives that neither approach could have handled independently, while corporate forces continued attacking a medical facility that was treating their own wounded. "Formal recognition," he said, making a decision that would either legitimize their medical partnership or make them permanent targets for elimination. "You mean the life bond ceremony that makes our cooperation official rather than just emergency medical treatment? The ceremony that grants us permanent authority to prevent the weaponization of medical technology, while ensuring that healing serves all species rather than corporate convenience," Lyrana confirmed. "Though completing the bond under these circumstances would make our partnership permanent regardless of personal preferences or political consequences. Doc examined the corporate soldiers he was treating, noting that several of them were looking around the medical facility, with expressions that suggested they'd never seen enemy wounded being treated with the same care as friendly casualties. "You know what I think. I'm beginning to be able to sense what you think, actually. One of the more interesting side effects of consciousness integration. I think," Doc said, reaching toward the life bond formalization controls, "that medical neutrality is more important than personal safety, and that people who try to weaponize healing technology need to be stopped regardless of the risks involved." "Are you certain? The permanent life bond creates connections that transcend individual identity. We would become partners in ways that neither human nor Veltani relationships typically encompass." Doc looked at the alien woman whose willingness to sacrifice her life to save human soldiers had led to the most important medical breakthrough in interspecies history, and whose consciousness was already becoming integral to his understanding of what healing could accomplish when cooperation transcended species boundaries. "Lyrana, I've been a combat medic for 8 years. I've learned that the most important medical decisions are usually the ones where you choose to help people regardless of who they are, where they come from, or whether helping them creates complications you can't predict." He activated the formalization protocols that would make their life bond permanent. "Besides, consciousness sharing with someone whose primary concern is healing people seems like it might improve my medical practice considerably." "And I," Lyrana replied, her consciousness merging more completely with his as the ceremony began, "have learned that the most effective healing happens when different approaches combine to create capabilities that neither could achieve alone." The formal life bond ceremony took place in the middle of active combat, with wounded soldiers from both sides serving as witnesses to the first officially recognized interspecies medical partnership in recorded history. Their vows included promises to use their shared abilities to heal rather than harm, to protect medical neutrality against corporate weaponization, and to ensure that advanced medical technology served life rather than death regardless of species or political affiliation. "I promise," Doc said as bioscanners confirmed his permanent integration with Veltani healing systems, "to learn proper bioenergy protocols, since apparently sharing life force involves significantly more complex medical procedures than human blood transfusions." The laughter that followed came from wounded soldiers who were receiving treatment that neither human nor Veltani medicine could have provided independently, demonstrating that cooperation could overcome challenges that corporate interests preferred to keep insurmountable. "And I promise," Lyrana replied, "to help you understand that the most advanced medical technology works best when operated by individuals whose personal bonds guarantee they'll prioritize patient welfare over military objectives." As the life bond ceremony completed and corporate forces found themselves unable to continue attacking a medical facility that was demonstrably serving healing rather than military purposes, Doc felt the weight of permanent responsibility settling around him like a particularly sophisticated piece of medical equipment that he'd be learning to operate for the rest of his life. 6 months after the corporate assault that had failed to capture them, Doc stood in the observation deck of the new Geneva Medical Center, watching interspecies medical teams treat patients using protocols that combined human precision with Veltani bioenergy healing. The life bond integration with Lyrana had become the model for medical partnerships that were revolutionizing treatment capabilities throughout the sector. "The integration reports are remarkable," Lyrana said, joining him at the viewing portal while accessing patient data through their shared consciousness. 17 different medical facilities are now operating successful human-Veltani partnerships, and patient survival rates have improved by 43% across all major injury categories. The life bond training programs are exceeding enrollment expectations, Doc noted, reviewing applications from medical personnel who wanted to learn interspecies healing techniques. Though most of them are choosing formal courtship processes rather than the emergency battlefield transfusion during corporate assault method we used. Probably safer for everyone involved. Less chance of accidentally triggering ancient bonding protocols while treating life-threatening energy depletion. Though considerably less romantic. There's something to be said for relationships that begin with one partner literally sharing their life force to save the other during a medical crisis. Doc accessed their biointegration patterns, marveling at how completely their consciousness had merged while maintaining their individual identities. The life bond had evolved far beyond its original medical function to become something unprecedented, a permanent sharing of awareness that enhanced both their healing abilities and their understanding of what partnership could become when two minds learn to work as a unified system. The corporate trials are proceeding successfully, Lyrana reported, her consciousness touching his with information about the legal proceedings that had followed their exposure of corporate medical sabotage. Meridian Corporate Security has been dissolved. Their executives are facing charges for crimes against medical neutrality, and the weapons-grade medical technology they were developing has been transferred to humanitarian organizations. Any attempts to claim that life bond partnerships represent unauthorized alien influence over human medical systems. Several, but they've been dismissed by tribunals that recognize the partnerships as legitimate medical collaborations rather than foreign infiltration. Lyrana's patterns shifted to colors that Doc's enhanced awareness recognized as satisfaction. Apparently, the evidence of improved patient outcomes is difficult to argue against, even for those who oppose interspecies cooperation on principle. The evening routine they developed involved reviewing patient cases while sharing the kind of consciousness-integrated conversation that had become natural through months of bonded partnership. Doc could access Lyrana's emotional responses to treatment challenges, while she could sense his technical satisfaction with properly functioning medical equipment, creating a level of professional intimacy that transcended anything either species had imagined possible. The new biointegrated medical systems are performing beyond specifications, Doc noted, reviewing diagnostics that showed their healing capabilities continuing to evolve through shared consciousness. We're actually becoming more effective at this over time. The life bond was designed to enhance partnership effectiveness through continued integration, Lyrana confirmed. Though I suspect our improvement has as much to do with genuine emotional compatibility as with ancient bonding technology. Emotional compatibility, Doc repeated, accessing their shared awareness to examine the feelings that had developed alongside their professional cooperation. You mean the fact that consciousness sharing has revealed that we actually like each other as individuals, rather than just as medical partners. The biointegration requires emotional resonance patterns that can only be sustained through authentic personal connection, Lyrana said, her luminescent markings shifting to patterns that indicated deep contentment. Which means our medical partnership was only possible because we were emotionally compatible from the beginning. Doc considered this, reviewing their shared memories of that first emergency treatment to analyze the emotional patterns that had made the life bond activation possible. You trusted me to perform a medical procedure that had never been attempted between species. I trusted you because your immediate response to my condition was to risk unknown consequences rather than let someone die who'd been trying to help your people. Lyrana's consciousness merged more closely with his as they accessed the memory together. The life bond doesn't activate for those whose primary concern is self-preservation. And I trusted you because you'd been risking your life to save human soldiers despite knowing it would eventually kill you. Doc felt their shared awareness settling into the peaceful synchronization that marked their successful integration. Though I have to admit, consciousness sharing with you has revealed personality traits I never would have discovered through normal courtship. Such as, such as the fact that your idea of relaxing after a difficult surgery involves mentally reviewing bioenergy optimization techniques while accessing 17 different diagnostic databases simultaneously. Doc grinned. Most humans would find that exhausting. I find it remarkably attractive. And your approach to medical problem solving involves systematic analysis of every possible failure mode, while maintaining optimism that somehow everything will work out anyway. Lyrana replied with amusement. Most Veltani would find that contradictory. I find it perfectly balanced. As they settled into the shared meditation that had become their evening routine, a practice that strengthened their life bond integration, while maintaining their individual identities, Doc reflected on the journey from emergency medical treatment to permanent partnership with someone whose consciousness complemented his own in ways that enhanced both their capabilities and their understanding of what healing could become. You know, he said, feeling their shared awareness settling into patterns that indicated complete emotional and professional synchronization. When I became a combat medic, my goal was to save as many lives as possible using the best medical techniques available. And now I save lives using medical techniques that didn't exist before we learned to share consciousness, while partnered with someone whose approach to healing has taught me that the most advanced medicine happens when different perspectives combine to create capabilities that neither could achieve alone. Doc paused, accessing their shared understanding of how completely their professional and personal lives had integrated. It's either the most successful career development in medical history, or the most elaborate way anyone's ever accidentally discovered they were meant to work together. Why not both? Lyrana replied, her consciousness touching his with the intimacy that had become the foundation of their partnership. Though I prefer to think of it as the most successful medical experiment ever conducted, one where both the doctor and the patient discovered they were better together than either could be alone. The best medical procedures, Doc agreed, always have unexpected positive consequences. Samuel Doc Reeves had started as someone who treated injuries that threatened individual survival. He'd ended up as someone who treated the barriers between species that threatened collective survival, one shared life force at a time. And somehow in the process, he discovered that the most important healing of his career hadn't been medical, it had been the repair of his own incomplete understanding of what partnership could become when two minds learned to work together as a unified consciousness, dedicated to preserving life in all its forms, regardless of species or the artificial boundaries that corporate interests tried to maintain between those who needed healing and those who could provide it.